Thank you so much for watching. This is my second ever how-to video. And for this project, I wanted to build something a little bit bigger. And for me to be able to do that, I knew I had to find something other than styrofoam plates to use for the diffuser. So I ended up finding some acrylic on Amazon. It turned out great. So let me show you how I did it. The first thing you need to do is go out and buy some wood. Now I ended up using some 1 inch thick by 4 inches tall, and I believe it came in 8-foot long pieces. This step, all I'm doing is cutting it down to size. You're going to need to make 45-degree angle cuts, and each piece needs to be exactly 13 inches long. And to make this go a little bit more quickly, I did clamp down some wood to the right of my miter saw. So all I had to do after each 45-degree angle cut was to flip the board over and then butt it up against those pieces of wood, and then make another 45-degree cut. And that would ensure each piece was going to be exactly 13 inches long. And you do want to make sure that every piece is as even as possible and that they kind of line up and match up, because if one piece is longer than the other, your square is not going to quite look like a square. But it was pretty easy. It probably only took me about 15-20 minutes to make all the cuts I needed here. And so yeah, just kind of go through and we'll make the rest of them here. Once we have all the pieces cut, the next thing we need to do is create that small little incision where the acrylic is going to sit. And for this, I borrowed my brother-in-law's table saw. It worked out great. It was super easy. And that cut that I'm making, it's about a 1/2 inch from the top. So you're going to want to measure down and adjust your guide. About 1/2 inch from the top is where that incision is going to be made. And as far as how thick it is, I would start out making that cut maybe about 1/4 of an inch deep, maybe even a little bit less than that, and then just do it on 4 of them, and then try testing it out with your acrylic or whatever you ended up using. Just make sure it fits in there nicely. And you can always make a little bit deeper cut if you need a little bit more wiggle room, but you can't go back if you do it too much. So start out erring on the side of caution, make that incision as little as possible, and you can always go back and make it thicker. Now, depending on the size of your blade, the acrylic that I used, link in the description, I only needed to make 1 incision with that blade, and that created a thick enough groove for that acrylic to fit in there. It was snug, it was tight. If I had to do it again, I'd probably go back and adjust the guide just a fraction of an inch and run it through the blade again, just to create a little bit thicker groove, so the acrylic would fit in there just a little bit easier. But it worked out fine just using that one pass through. But again, you might want to, depending on the size of your blade, make that cut a little bit thicker just to make it easier. So we'll go through the rest of these pieces, and we'll go to the next step.
I guess you're back. Are you gonna tell me where you went? All the messages I sent with no reply. It's like that. You're just gonna walk into my room. I hate how you assume I'll take the pleasure and the pain, the sorrows in your brain, 'cause I know you're on the run. I'll take the pleasure and the pain, your secrets to my...
All I'm going to do here in this step is just quickly, lightly sand all the edges if there's any frayed wood. I want to make sure that when I'm putting these pieces together, there's nothing that can create any separation on the edges. I want it to be as square as possible. So there wasn't much to do. You can see I'm just going through it pretty quickly here, but definitely something I'd recommend doing, taking a couple minutes to go through them all. So we'll do that with the rest of them, and then we'll be moving on.
'Cause you are the only one. 'Cause you are the only one. The only one. 'Cause you are the only one.
So this next step actually came about from a comment I received in my previous video. User OSMLANZ recommended maybe using some chrome reflective tape on the inside. So I went out and bought some reflective tape, and I tested it out, and you could definitely tell a difference in the brightness using the reflective tape versus just using the natural wood color. And the reflective tape, it wasn't super expensive, but it wasn't that cheap either. And with the amount of squares I was going to make, it would have costed a decent amount of money. So I went out and bought the cheapest paint I could find at Home Depot, and I definitely went overkill. You don't need that size of a container. You could get away with just using probably the smallest can they make. And I compared using paint with the chrome reflective tape, and it looked about the same. I couldn't really tell a difference. So in the efforts of saving money, I decided to go with the paint. And all I'm doing is painting the inside of each piece and below that line that we cut for the acrylic to sit in. So I'm doing that with all the pieces. And I did end up doing 2 coats on each one. So just depending on how it looks, I thought you could still see a little bit of the wood grain through the first coat, so I wanted to go and do another one. You can maybe even do 3 coats too, but 2 work just fine. And it definitely makes the end product look a little bit brighter compared to not using anything. And the reason I think white paint works well, same with the chrome reflective tape, is it just gives the LED lights something more to bounce off of. The light's not absorbed as much, and this is just me speculating. I have no idea really what I'm talking about, but in my mind that makes sense. Light reflects off white a little bit better than different colors, so definitely do not skip this step. It's very simple, very easy to do, and the end result's going to look a little bit better. Now, I don't know if you noticed at the beginning of the video on the table outside, I had a completed square that was brown. Now, I could be wrong, but I think this would be the point where you'd want to either paint or stain the outside if you wanted to have a different color. I realize the natural wood color may not fit with whatever theme or decor you have in the room that you're planning to put these in, so you can definitely paint them a different color. Make sure to paint the 45-degree angle cut, whatever color, or stain it whatever color you want. That could show through a little bit when you put these together, so versus having to go back and do it again, just do it all up front. All right, we'll finish up here and move on to the next. At this point, we can begin to assemble our squares with the diffuser. And what I ended up using as a diffuser, I found some white acrylic on Amazon. It was 12 inches by 12 inches by 1/8 inch thick. And I definitely took advantage of Amazon's free returns. I ordered so many different things before I stumbled across this, and I'm super happy I found it. I don't think there's really anything else out there that could have done as good of a job. The issue I kept having at the beginning of this project was I was still trying to use wood that was only 2 inches tall, and no matter what diffuser I was trying to use, I could either see the individual LED lights through it, and I didn't like that, or there was a noticeable dark spot in the middle where the light just didn't shine as bright. Now to solve that, that's where I got the 4-inch tall pieces of wood, and by separating the light from the diffuser just those couple extra inches, it made all the difference in the world. Everything is super evenly lit. You can't see any of the LED lights underneath it, and it just has that awesome glow that I was looking for. As far as assembling these, I'm just using some Gorilla wood glue, putting a small bead on each corner before I'm putting them together. And going back to my previous step, I did mention if I had to do it over, I'd probably make the groove where the acrylic is sitting in just a little bit wider, maybe just a fraction of an inch wider. You can probably see that I'm having to use a hammer to kind of tap these in place. Not a huge deal, but I think if it was just a tiny bit wider, they would have slid in there a little bit easier and made this step go a little bit faster. Now what I'm trying to do with these squares after I put one together is just set it down, eyeball it, and make sure that everything does look as square as possible. I probably wish I used a tool to help me with this if I did it again, but it's not the end of the world. I'm still very happy with the way they all turned out. So now we'll just put together the rest of the boxes and go to the next step. figured out the design that I wanted, and I'm going to make the cuts to string the LED lights through. Now I'm using a router. You could use a saw, a chisel, whatever tool you have at your disposal. You don't have to worry about making these super neat or clean looking, since the majority of them aren't going to be seen. You just want to make it wide enough to string 2 LED strips through, so about 1/2 inch is all that you need. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit bigger or not, but 1/2 inch will be about perfect. If you're confused as far as what this step is for or why I'm doing it the way I'm doing, it'll make sense in the next step.
Let's not give up too soon, 'cause we can make
I probably didn't need to show this step, but all I'm doing is mapping out just kind of a test run with the LED strips, just to make sure that I'm going to have enough LED strip to cover all 5 boxes that I have here. I know I cut a few of them out, but just doing a test run with the path I intend to take, and making sure I'm not going to run out there at the end. And in this clip, I think I only show me stringing up one strip on one side. I definitely do put another strip going up the other side as well. Embarrassing than anything, this step, because I'm sure there's 100 different ways that this could have been done better, but I ended up finding some door hinge type things, very small ones at Home Depot. I'll leave a link in the description, and I use that to attach the squares together. After putting all the hinges on the back, I did go through, and I didn't make a video, but I did put some Gorilla wood glue in between all the squares. Hindsight, I wish I would have just started with the Gorilla glue, the Gorilla wood glue, and see if that was strong enough to hold everything together before putting the hinges on. Not that the hinges didn't work, but it was just an extra step that could have been maybe avoided, and made this project go a little bit quicker.
Do you know, time is running out for me and you. So what you gonna do?
We're getting close to being done, but we need to string the LED strips through our squares now. And what I'm going to be doing here is starting at the bottom, or what's going to be the bottom, and I am going to string one strip up one side, and then after doing that, I'm going to string the other strip on the other side. And the reason I'm doing it this way versus stringing it all the way to the top and then start working my way back down if I have any extra left over, is with all the different scenes that this particular LED strip has, like a rainbow scene, a chasing color scene, all of those colors start out at the same time at the bottom. So as they're going through the squares, I want the colors to be the same on each side as they're going up, if that makes sense. If I were to just string one strip up one side and then start working my way back down the other side, I think that would kind of mess up with the colors and maybe not look quite as good. And you probably can't tell from the video, but the LED strips that I used, it has the power source that's connected to, I guess you would call it the controller, and then the controller has 2 separate connectors, and that's where you're going to plug in the LED strips to. So one strip is going to be plugged into the one connector, the other strip is going to be plugged into the other connector, and those are the 2 strips that I'm running up on either side of the squares. And with the particular LEDs that I used, each strip is, I believe, 16 feet long approximately. I slowed it down here so you can see I'm at the point where I am making the cuts on the LED strips to get rid of the excess, and all the LED strips have their certain cutting points. So all I'm trying to do here is to figure out where I can make these cuts to minimize either the overlapping of the strips or to minimize the gap between the strips. And no one's going to ever accuse me of being the smartest guy in the room, so it's definitely taking me a while to figure this out. But I eventually kind of see where, oh, yep, this will be the best place to make the cut so that there's no overlapping. And that's all I'm doing at this step. Pretty easy, and there's enough cutting points where you should be able to get it pretty close no matter what the size of your project is. We are officially on the last step, and for this we just need to cover up the back with something. I use some thicker cardstock type paper. and it worked out pretty well. If you're doing this on your own, I would recommend using the paper, but then on top of the paper, I would put something that would block the light from coming through, maybe some cardboard, different type of material that would ensure all the light stayed in the square. It may not make a difference, but my guess is you might be able to tell that things are a little bit brighter if you didn't allow any of the light to escape out the back. Now for the exciting conclusion of every project to see if it actually works. I think it was 2 o'clock in the morning right now. I was exhausted. I was just praying that it was going to light up when I plugged it in. And I was super happy when both strips lit up when I plugged it in. The first strip there worked. Second strip worked as well. But it was an awesome project. I had a lot of fun. I think I like these a little bit more than the hexagons I made, and it was a little bit easier as well. I ended up making 2 of these square towers, so I'll put all the finished videos and pictures right after this.